Okay, sure. I think we can start.
Okay. I think in terms of your Gantt list, the first thing that I wanted to ask about was the second subtlety in the main deck. Do you think that slot and change?
Yes, so I think you can change that slot, and I personally don't really love the second ability, but
Yeah.
it was probably the best card in terms of number because um, reviewing the list in the last days of the testing, we figured you were going to side in 7 cards and cut 5 or 6 versus Scam and uh, Yagmut and also Amulet because we used to play Force of Negation. That
Mhm.
was an out. You said it out.
Yeah.
So the side versus Yagmut was -4 Ragavan, -2 Pierce, and -1 Force. And you used to side just 5 cards.
Yeah.
And also we mapped the matchup and we figured that you always wanted to side in the Sableti versus Yagmut, Red Black Evoke, Amulet, and
Yeah.
also other decks we expected like Zoo, Tron, etc. So and the Force
Mhm.
was coming out a lot, especially like in Mirror and versus Evoke versus Yagmut versus Zoo. So we decided to do this swap. I think probably the Force belongs in the main deck better because like the reasoning behind the Force main deck was your opponent, since they enter his open deck list, as always to respect it, or at least
Yeah.
they should. But
Mhm.
in terms of numbers, this concept wasn't really great. So we decided to play the Solid main deck. I think maybe you can decide to play either the third shredder in the main,
Yeah.
because the times where it comes in and it comes out is similar to Sableti, or you can even
Yeah.
play a third Golding. I think I advise for the Bird main deck because it has a better matchup spread.
Yeah.
Like of course it's not great versus Amulet, but it's okay. Especially if you are on the play, you can just slam it on turn 2, and the card can filter through your through the card you need. While
Yeah.
otherwise, I think Stern Scolding is another card you can run in the main, just because it's similar to Sablet in terms of creatures, but of course is more powerful and is very strong when you are on the draw.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, would you consider, I think you mentioned the force over the second subtlety in the open decklist environment to just kind of like have them thinking about that?
Yes, like actually the first list we brewed was with a Force main deck, and I like the card, but I think the card is strange because when it's good, it's very very good, but when it's
Yeah.
bad, it's basically a cancel for free mana, and sometimes it has really a few slots. And since like in my testing, the deck was performing very good versus Rhinos. Like the main deck is very tuned to beat Rhinos.
Yeah.
Sometimes, of course, you can lose to the perfect hand, but overall, you had a lot of comebacks with Shredder, etc. And in the sideboard, since you play Shredders, you play even a third copy, you have Sableti, etc. Their flash game plan is not particularly powerful, like versus Andrea Mengucci's list, for example, where he has only a MurkGuide as a threat.
Yeah.
The flash plan of Rhino is very impactful because Endurance is backbreaking, Sablet is backbreaking. Even Mystical Dispute might be very strong versus Murktide, while Manist was a bit more prepared against that type of game. So we decided to cut the force, but I think it's fine. You have to find a slot that doesn't impact how you side. So if you can find
Yeah.
a sideboard configuration, I think I'm very I don't know, keen on making the perfect numbers because I think in this particularly moment of the meta, having a blank top deck might be terrible. So I'd rather play maybe a worse deck list, but when I side, I have all my cards at work rather than having you know, some better cards, but a clunkier sideboard or worse numbers.
Yeah, I've been trying to map out like different options and see like what comes in where, and like if something comes in against 4 of the 5 decks, then I'm trying to consider moving it to main just to like make more sense, and then free up a board slot for a weaker matchup.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Another thing, like we considered is like we wanted to be strong versus a certain type of games and decks. So like I decided eventually to cut a Fable from the sideboard because I wasn't particularly like I said, okay, sure, I don't want I will not face any Omnat deck, so I'm fine
Yeah.
cutting one Fable since I side in Fable only versus red black.
Yeah.
But of course, like when you play, for example, on Magical Line or on your local game store, it's better to have more number of those effects. But I was testing versus a very specific field,
Yeah.
so that's why I have some numbers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would you ever consider moving the snare main deck over the second?
Yes, I think I had a discussion with Marcio Carvalho and the Portuguese team about that because they were playing that, and I think they registered the snare main deck, while I prefer to play the second scolding. The reason is more mathematically on my part because I was analyzing the decks, and I figured that Spell Snare has a lower matchup spread. Like versus Amulet, you never use it, and versus Rhinos, you can only counter Fire Eyes, while Stern Scolding in the main deck counters Tishana, and sometimes, of course, you can counter the Shardless.
Yeah.
And of course, it's stronger versus Yawgmoth because you can counter the Grist, and it's stronger versus Red Black because you can counter late game threats.
Yeah,
Of course,
that's fair too.
Snare is more surgical because you can counter Agatha Soul Cauldron, you can counter Terminate, but I think those points were a bit anecdotal. Like, of course, you sometimes you do that, but most of the times you will lose to other cards. And Marcio said that he wanted to play Snare because the longer the run go, then you will face more decks that are similar to yours. So Red Black and MurkGuide, and versus those decks, Snare is very good, of course. So I think like it's very minor as a detail, but yeah, you can rush there.
That's kind of where I was leaning at. I think like I have my sideboard mapped out now, and I'm bringing in there against Rakdos, Yawgmoth, and Murktide. And I mean, both Snare and Scolding are definitely weak against Rhinos and Living End, which isn't, I don't want to play against Living End at all, but it could come up.
Yeah, I think playing versus Living End is fine open deck list because you can mulligan to a certain type of hand, while their mulligan shouldn't be very impactful by how they play the game because their gameplay is very consistent and repetitive, while you can just mulligan Holy Cantrips, and like you are looking for Ragan, specifically Ragan plus counter spells. So I think your matchup is fine, but if you are worried about Living End, you can run more Chalice of the Void or cards like that. I think we are fine. Talking about Scolding, I think you probably keep 1 or 2 scoldings. I don't advise
agreed.
to side in the third copy, but yeah, mostly for Greece. But even sometimes you counter shardless to keep attacking with Ragavan if you have it. Like, it's not a terrible card.
Oh, versus Rhinos, you mean?
No, versus Livingen.
Oh, sure, yeah. Next question was about a fourth bolt. I feel like that would be like quite good right now, given prevalence of like Scam, the Mirror, and Yawgmoth. I don't even actually truly believe that it's terrible against the Amulet, but it's one of the things that I board out. But I definitely don't mind having it so that I can connect early with Rag or something if they have a Grazer. Do you think there's room for a fourth bolt?
Yeah, I think actually, like, I had a discussion with Mattia Rizzi while we were playing, and we were talking about this topic of the fourth bolt, and I think we both had ended playing free, but I wanted to try to play 4. I think you can even cut the subreddit for a fourth bolt. You can try to make this concept. I think it's very interesting. I would personally try that. Yeah, because a lot of games ends up being like Bolt is very strong versus the deck you mentioned, but also like it gives you some reach versus the good draws of Rhinos game 1 when they stuck a lot of Rhinos and maybe you started with a DRC, so you're connecting. And also, like, I get those games where my opponent was at 3 and I needed a fourth bolt. And yeah, I think the card is fine. Maybe it's fine to play that, especially in a shell like my deck with the shredders and etc.
Yeah, I like the idea of it for sure. I thought about. I think I wouldn't want to go below like 14 kind of creature threats because it would just feel like so threat light. Probably be hard to close the game. The second subtlety is the 15.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, now that you have preordain, you can, like, sometimes I can't preordain as half of a threat because it really helps you digging through what you're looking for. So I'm not super worried about having threats because, like, if the matchup requires you having a creature on turn 1, you can just take a mulligan because you know that you're against Living End or you're against Tron. While if you're against a value deck or a mid-range deck, you usually don't need to. You're usually the control, because like versus red-black, the tendency pre-board is keeping her hand with cantrips, deal with the board, and then play Murktide Protector with counter spells. They usually have like 2 terminates, so it's difficult for them to keep up.
Yeah. Are you on? Are you on Mangu's idea of thinking of just trying not to mulligan against the unless you absolutely have to?
Sorry, I missed the message. What did you say?
Are you on Mangu's idea of not mulliganing against Gam unless you like absolutely have to?
I don't know. That's a bit difficult to answer. I think. I personally, like, when I learned the deck 3 years ago, I read a guide by Doomswitch, and he was saying that you should keep any hand with lands and spells, and like, especially now that we have preordained, this concept works. But I think, especially on the draw, I'd keep something that like, there are some hands that are unkeepable. When you have only creatures or when you have only cantrips on the draw, like, and the Lantern one Ragavan, you may lose. So I think keep a hand with the sense that doesn't die to something too simple. Like, if your hand dies to a combination, it's fine to keep. If your hand dies to only one threat, you just mulligan. I don't know if I.
Well, I think that.
Okay.
I think there's a wider range of hands that you want to mull than no landers is the idea.
Yeah, yeah. Like if your
Um,
hand is like Ragavan, on the it's like Ragavan, Iteration, Freelance, and Lightning Bolt, you probably might mulligan because of
Down
course
the draw.
yeah because like Ragavan is terrible usually versus Bowmaster, and you don't have a way to battle that. So if they play turn 2 Bowmaster, turn 3 Fable, you lose.
Yeah, it doesn't feel very good. Um, you mentioned Hearse in the board. Do you like Hearse against the mirror at all?
I think Curse is the best card in the mirror that you can side in.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. I was playing the mirror with a friend locally, and we were just having these like really, really long games. Where Hearse was obviously amazing, and you just like try not to play your Odawara and try to use it later to bounce MurkGuide at a pivotal point. Um, what was I going to say? Oh my god. Do you think there's any merit to bring in Curse against Scam as the same kind of idea, just like a threat that can be present and you can activate it later?
Yeah, I usually side in Hearts versus Red Black because um, first they have Croxa coming from the sideboard or even in the main, and second it turns off the Undying effects. So you limit their ability to event of deck more because their deck, especially post board, your deck is so much better than theirs because they can draw the Line of the Void that is terrible. They can draw the Undying effects, etc. So with Earth, you really limit their deck. And yeah, I also like it as an additional threat, especially if I'm keeping in the Ragavans, because you can cube
Yeah.
it maybe in the mid late game. Yeah, I like the card. Is fine.
Yeah, I think it's really good. So are you boarding out DRCs if you see Lightline?
Yes, I boarded out 4 DRC and 1 spell pierce, and I was siding in, of course, Snare, Scolding, Hearse, Fable, and Shredder. That was my in and out usually.
Yeah, that makes sense. In the mirror, if you see an opponent with a Hearse, is there any way you're bringing in a cast or?
Sure,
Oh, yeah.
yes, I do. I do
Yep.
because cast eventually is an answer to that, but also is fine to deal with a Ragavan or a DRC,
Yeah.
especially if my opponent is not like sometimes they stock a couple of DRC and you can 2-for-1. But overall, I think if your opponent is a seasoned player, the games tend to be draw go until someone misses a land drop. So I think one card that is not incredible, it's fine because you will end up having 7 cards a lot.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's fine to have the perfect answer for the threat that kills you.
Yeah. In the mirror, I noticed that you don't bring in Fable too. Why is that?
I protested a lot, and I was enthusiastic with the Fable in the beginning, especially like I was bringing in even 2 sometimes, but I figured that I was losing to MurkGuide. So the card was like, okay, I play 3 mana for the Fable. I usually play it on turn 4, keeping up Pierce, and then your opponent plays MurkGuide, and you lose. Like, because if you don't find an answer for that, and there aren't many, you usually go behind. So having this 2-2 doesn't really help you. But I think it's fine to bring it in if you're expecting some sort of a game. If the game goes very long and it's fine, but it's difficult because the 2-2 is usually relevant as a body, and you tend to play a lot of land drops, especially in the early game. Like you want to go at least out of 5 or 6 lands before you start holding cards. And in the mirror, there aren't many dead cards. Maybe Pierce in the late game, but any other
Yeah.
card you really want to keep. So the looting effect is not great. And the flipping
No, that's
side
fair.
is another 2/2 that doesn't copy a lot of stuff. I think
Yeah,
it's
it doesn't.
it's a fine card, but it's not something you really have to bring in.
Yeah, I see that. Um, with the narrowness of Fable here that I'm seeing on the spread, you think that there's just like a better card to bring in against Scam? Like, is that what you would cut for your Brotherhood then in the board that you mentioned you wanted?
Yes, yes, I think I think Fable is very very strong versus Scam because I
Yeah.
expect turn one Lilian of the Void plus something. So
Yep.
eventually you will draw your MurkGuide, and if you have a way to discard them, it's fine. I think versus Scam, we figured out that Brazen Borrower was a strong card.
Yeah.
Brotherhood, and I think I will never again play a tournament without Brotherhood because I missed the card so much. And I don't know. I think even if in a very specific meta, you will still find spots where the card was good. In my testing, Brotherhood wasn't very good versus Red Black. In fact, I beat Red Black in my RC,
Oh, yeah.
but the card is usually very strong versus Yogmoth, and is even like is unbeatable versus um, Scales.
Yep.
So it's fine to
Yep.
have one
Yep.
copy of
Scales
the
just
golden
pulled for
ticket.
that. Yeah.
But also, I don't know, like specifically versus Scam, I like um, Fable because provides body. And
Yeah.
if they can, because of course, since you don't have the Mork Dead anymore, you will struggle to end the game. So if you make them use the removal on the two Fable side, then your Ragavan are much better, especially in the because the game versus Scams tend to go this way. They play Leyline and they start playing creatures, usually counter or remove any of them, and then you start to chain the cantrips. So you have a lot of cards, and they are in the top deck mode. And the problems of the matchups are usually Shieldred, and that's it. So if you can neutralize the Shieldred, the game should be on your part. But of course, they will start drawing the removals, the bolts, etc. So your Ragavan is not super easy to connect, and you don't have a lot of creatures. So Fable is very good in that spot. A
Yeah.
card that's similar is like you can play the One Ring, but the card is also dangerous because
Interesting.
let's see, you are at 13, you can draw too much.
Mm.
So, but I like the card personally. You can play that. I don't advise, but it's fine. Like if you play that, you should also play a Borrower, so you can eventually
Yeah.
draw Borrower, bounce the ley line, and then start playing the Mortites to win the game, since you should have a lot of cards. Or even because since you break us into fire, you will eventually find a way to deal with your own ring.
I would have never thought of that.
Yeah, we play tested that. At least I did.
Yeah.
But I think Fable is better because it has a better matchup spread, like
Mm.
versus blue white decks versus binding decks. Fable is better because they have to deal it twice. Um, they usually binding the Fable and then remove the token, but of course it's two answers, etc. And
Yeah.
the card is also fine in other matchups. But yeah, you can try the ring and see how it feels. You can even start the testing where you have like in advanced board and you draw the ring and you go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. So what do you think you would cut from your list for the one of Brotherhood End?
Um, well, let me check my list because I already think I made the cut somewhere.
Right.
Give me a second. I will check my
And
Twitter.
like,
So the last cards we added was yeah, I think you can. So I was playing one Fable. You can cut probably one between Snare and Scolding. Maybe three effects of that are enough.
yeah.
Since you already play Like Brotherhood is fine versus Cauldron, so Snare is not great, and Brotherhood is also fine versus those decks where you want to counter the early drop. So I think it's fine to cut one of these, so you have free Scalding effect, free count one
Yeah.
mana counter effect.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And we talked about the Rhinos matchup a little bit. It's super unique to me in a few different ways. Obviously, free board, it seems pretty cookie cutter. I was trying to prevent them from play post board. To me, it comes down to a lot more grindy. We have a lot of answers to Rhinos. They bring in obviously endurances to battle us. And then to me, it always comes down to like a Murktide endurance type of balancing battle. On the play, I feel really good about it. On the draw, I feel a little bit more shaky. And Ragavan always seems like it might not be powerful enough to me post board on the draw. They just have so much cheap and efficient removal for it.
I mean, I agree on the uniqueness of the matchup. I think Ragavan is fine to have because you force them to have an interaction for it, and I think they should board in some Fire Ice, but board out, sorry. But even if they wasted that gun on that and they have two land turn one shock land or red on that, so not all the hands can produce that, is fine because it's one less bounce effect later. So I like all my creatures there. I think one of your best cards is Shredder because Shredder is very strong versus Endurance and that kind of games. And I usually like to keep one Subtlety because you can, like, Subtlety is very strong versus their Murktide, but it's even strong versus their own Subtlety or Endurance sometimes. I think like they should respect a lot your counter spells, so they will cascade less on turn 3. And yeah, it's very strong, but once you understand the flow, it's fine. Of course, your best card are probably like Chalice of the Void because you can leave it there and counter whatever, like something you can keep there, and then you can just you can just pierce the Flame of Honor, and the Anolith is also very strong. I think the only card I'm terrorized about is their Morted Regent, because sometimes you don't have a way to deal with that. So if you expect a lot of Rhinos, you can play a Borrower somewhere. I'm not sure where exactly. You can maybe cut the Force from my list to play a Borrower. Borrower was a consideration, and I think I like it, but we eventually didn't find the space, and it was, we're later in the stage of the testing, so we decided, okay, sure, we will leave Borrower at home, but it was a fine card.
Sure. And now that we're adding more Shredders to the deck, do you think we can take a more aggressive slant to how we build the deck, and that, like, feel like the deck got more and more counter heavy and reactive heavy with subtleties and or one drop counter spells? And the more Shredders you have in the deck, you want to be a little bit more proactive so you can trigger it. What are your thoughts on like shaving some number of these reactive cards for the fourth lightning bolt, or maybe even like another cantrip or something like that?
I think it's fine. Like you can probably. I think I always want to keep one Subtlety because Subtlety is sometimes a lifesaver, especially on the draw. And I think you can maybe cut one Scalding, I don't know, and play a third Shredder and a fourth Bolt. But yeah, I think it's probably a fine thing because your mulligan are smoother, etc. But you have to then fix the numbers. You have to understand what are the weakness of this plan, and then add more cards to fight this scenario. I think I like to play 2 Shredder in the main because Shredder is very strong on the play, medium on the draw. So you can change the numbers of the card regarding if you win the die roll or not. But if you want to play a more aggressive plan, it's fine. I'm already almost sold on the fourth bolt over the first over the second ability.
I really like the way
You-
Bolt is looking
you
right
play
now.
the-
Sorry.
You would play the third shredder in the sideboard.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's smart. Okay, thank you.
I think like Shredder was similar to Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and since Fable was a side-in only versus one matchup that was red-black, I decided to play Shredder. But also, I think you can maybe play Fable if you expect Omnat, Seismic Assault, and those strange decks. I don't know. I'd rather focus on the tier decks.
Like,
Of course, then Shredder is very, very strong versus Rhinos because for the endurance discourse. But maybe if you play a borrower, then you have other balance. Regarding another cantrip that you mentioned, I don't think like each time you play, you consider the card is so underwhelming now that I don't know if there is another good cantrip you can play, but
Is that still an option?
that's another underwhelming card because you really want consistency over graveyard. I think you're usually like I had one game that where I really needed some graveyard, but it was one in a lot of games. So I don't know. Like Scour is very randomic. I don't like it because you can't really set it. Where like in Pauper you play Brainstorm, so you have some games, but here is just mill 2 draw card. I don't advise it. I think maybe there is like I was discussing with my partner Max, and he's very high on playing the Surveil Land. Maybe that can be an option. I will test it. But I don't know regarding another country. I was considering like for the event to play one explosives in the main.
Wow.
I know someone who played one chalice in the main eventually, but I don't know. I think a lot of the decks now, like I think explosive might even be fine, but it's only strong versus Rhinos, of course.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and they have Force of Negation, so and they have a lot of way to deal with that. But it might be a timely card. I don't know, like consider it if you're really like expecting not a lot of Rhinos. But then, but the thing is, even if you expect a lot of Rhinos, you should get paired against maybe 2 or 3 maybe. So I think too many dedicated slots is not great. I think I'd rather have my deck that better against everything, because like in my RC I faced the 2 Scam, 2 Yawgmoth, Scales, and something else I forgot. So it was all the decks I mapped about, and it was fine.
Do you think? I know that like Chalice is obviously very good against Rhinos and Living In, but it like doesn't come in anywhere else. Do you find that awkward at all?
I think it's fine. Like even explosive doesn't really come against just versus Rhinos and Scales, but you still have to copy. So having like Chalice is particularly good because if Living End wants to counter that, they have to bring in cards, and they need to keep with the cards, so their game plan become slower, and eventually like if you think they have Foundation Breaker, you can board in another Scolding. So if you can stick with the Chalice, the game plan become very, very on your part. Well, versus Rhino, the card is very good post board because their game plan should involve suspending a Rhino, because of course if they suspend the card dodges the Fluster Storm, and they can better deal with the counter spell just disputing it. So
Yeah, totally.
like I was even considering having another copy.
Oh, yeah. It's very impactful when it's like a 10 in those two matchups, you know. Would you ever bring it in against Titan to thwart Summoner's Pact?
Yeah, it's one did.
I think if you have perfect numbers, you don't need it.
Yeah.
But if you are missing one card, it's probably fine. But make sure to play it like on turn 1. You shouldn't play that. Maybe on turn 2 is better because you can draw bubble. So
Okay.
you know, sometimes it's awkward.
When I was thinking about boarding it in against Titan, I think I might actually shave a bauble there.
I don't know. I think I won't cut any cantrip versus the deck that requires answers.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like I'd rather shave a bubble versus rhinos because post-board the games become more long and grindy. But versus amulet, I think it's more hit or miss, you know. So and regarding amulet, the last days of my testing, like actually the last day on the Thursday, I figured out that Magus of the Moon was a cringe card, like a bad card, because all the amulet decks had like a lot of answers, like Dismember, Fire Spout. Canister was even playing Bone Crusher, like so.
Yeah.
I think Magus is in a strange spot because you probably want to board it in because then they have a lot of bad cards and their plan is more is less consistent. But the card is not great when expected because you top 3 mana to play that, they play Dismember and kill you. So
Yeah.
like it's a strange card, but also like the card was very good versus other decks like Scales, Hammer, and Tribal Zoo. So I like to have it.
Yeah.
But I think if you really respect Amulet, I won't personally because I think the matchup is already good. But if you're really expecting like to face a lot of Amulets, I would play 2 Blood Moon and 1 Magus. Blood Moon
I like
is
the idea.
better, I think.
Yeah. I like the idea that you have forced them to board for both. And it's obviously going to dilute their plan a little bit because sometimes I think they might actually just be jamming like 67 cards, which feels really weird to me. But they also just have like Boseiju too in like 3s maybe?
It's not. They normally play full with it, you know.
Yeah. Like they definitely have answers to all of it, but they still just need to have them, I guess.
I mean, I play Needle and I won games needling the Boseiju and then playing Blood Moon. But also, like, I think it's fine. Like, they need to have untapped green source, Boseiju. This means that they can, like, really play turn 3 ring, tapping out, and then being dead to Blood Moon. But, like, there are a lot of situations where they tap out, and you just play Blood Moon. And if they don't have an untapped green source, they can do nothing. Or eventually, still like Boseiju gives you a land, so you can hold up counterspell again, or gain time. Like even if you gain 2 or 3 turns from then doing nothing, is great because you can start playing DRC. You can develop your hand with cantrips. So
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, of course, the best card versus Amulet is Ability. And if you are playing just one, the matchup can be a bit worse, but I don't think like I really think the matchup is so good. Like in my testing, it was very, very easy, like 70-30, something like that. And like even the Mango deck list, where he wanted to board out all the Ragavans, he had a good matchup.
Right.
So since I think I have a better plan.
Yeah, he was talking about like he had like some realization that he wasn't very good. Maybe he was talking about that the other day when he was playing Breach. I didn't really like think too much about it, but it seems interesting to think about at least. I certainly think that Heat is very good.
Yeah, I think it is very good personally. Again, just because sometimes if you don't deal with Triad, you die, and even in the late game, having like in the late game, you always have Delirium. So killing everything on site is very important. Of course, like I think his criticism was that the card, like since he was boarding out the Ragavans, his plan was basically countering everything and then play Morkted and countering everything again. But so only hit wasn't great because he was saying that if they start with Amulet, they play turn to something else, they play another Amulet, and then they start, doing a lot of mana, and your Nullit is dead. But I think it's a bit of a weak argument because in my experience, the card is good and the card is even better because sometimes you can even play it through a defense grid. That can happen. You don't have a lot of tools to deal with defense grid. So, and that's another argument for having Brotherhood Damned, because you can, like, if they play turn 1 Amulet on 2 defense grade, you play Brotherhood, and then you start again. So, I don't know. But I wouldn't be worried about Amulet. I think the best thing you can do is play 10 matches and rewatch those matches to understand your mistakes.
Yep,
and that's
makes
it.
sense.
Like I don't think adding cards is important because you already are well positioned and you have counter spells. They don't have a lot of covers. You have a cheap aggressive plan that they can't really neutralize. You have Saplety, post-board you have even more cards. You have Needle, Brotherhood, Casting to Fire, Blood Moons, etc. So it's fine. I also think that Amulet is a strange choice because you are really losing to Rhinos a lot, and your matchup versus Yawgmoth is strange. So unless you are a very strong Amulet player and you really trust your skill rather than the position of your deck, I wouldn't advise bringing Amulet. I think also Amulet did poor in the European RC. So
it did quite great. It had a really good conversion rate, so then it gets through.
It did good, like
the conversion rate from day 1 to day 2. It did.
Yeah, but from day 2 to top 2 Pro Tour, how was the conversion rate? Because I think that's the important data, right?
Oh,
yeah. I think Dom Harvey is going to be at the Canadian RC probably playing it, which is like a nightmare. So
yeah, also Jack Potter or House of Mana.
For sure, also
I think like if you're expecting Amulet, you can just play another Sablety or stuff like that.
Yeah,
but I
don't think there will be a lot.
Playing keen on playing sharp is the best you can do. Calculate the damage well, etc.
I don't think I really add any more questions, but is there anything else you'd like to speak to with like how you change the list or whatever?
Well, I think from the list I posted for the RC, I would just change something in the sideboard. Like the fourth board discourse is interesting. You can maybe play that and cut a Sablety. And if you play a fourth bolt, you can maybe cut a fetch to play a Fiery Islet, since you're a bit less interested in hardcasting the Sablety. You're a bit like your curve decrease by something, even because you're also playing one as Fable. And then so one Fable, one Magus, one Blood Moon, one Casting to Fire to Flusterstorm, one Stir Scalding or Spell Snare. I would leave this question open.
Yeah.
And Peating Needle, Shredder, Force, Explosives to Chalice, and then you can play Brotherhood and Alichanced Hearse. That's what I would do. If someone has any other question, I will...
I have a few questions first on the Amulet and Yawgmoth's matchup.
Sure.
The first thing in the Amulet matchup, do you still keep in Lightning Bolt posts?
I keep 2, I think.
yeah, and the other thing in the Yawgmoth matchup, when you did the testing for the RC, did you identify exactly what makes the Yawgmoth matchup difficult for MurkGuide?
Well, I think I played 20 matches and then I played 10 game once. Apart from that, and then I played a bit on the leagues. So let's say something around 40 matches. I think the card I was losing a lot to game one was Grist. Grist is very strong. So because like speaking with Yawgmoth player, there are two philosophies. Someone just want to play Grist on turn 3. And this is the part of the games you usually win because you can just kill it and then play Murktide. But other players tend to send back the Grist until you have something important, and you tend to lose those games because maybe you can keep mana open at some point, and if they slam Grist, you usually lose. Then of course Colder on turn 2 might be impactful, but I don't really think the card itself is the problem. I think the problem is only Grist. If they don't see Grist, the matchup is good. But I think the matchup is fine. The thing is, their deck is a combination between a limited pile of cards with Young Wolf, Stronghold Geist, Wall of Roots, etc., and a pile of very strong cards with Yawgmoth, Grist, Cauldron, etc., and Orcish. So if they see only the good part of their deck, the matchup is tough. If they see only the bad part, the matchup is a buy. If they see a mixture, you play. So this is game one. Game two, they should focus on a flash plan. So leaving a lot of mana open, maybe play turn 1 Halfling and then starting to pass to propose you Bowmaster, Endurance, Chord of Calling, etc. And eventually slamming Yawgmoth. So basically it's the same. You have more 1 mana counters. So the matchup should be better because you also don't have Ragavan. And you should play the flyers. Like Shredder is very good. DRC is medium. Is good when you have Delirium. Is bad when you play it naked on versus a Bowmaster. And the cantrips are usually strange. So my advice is try to play strategically. Like when you have a counter, play DRC. So if they play Orcish, you can counter that. And if they play Grist on an empty board, is fine. So try to understand what they can propose and how they play, what they have in hand based on how they play. But I think if you have even Brotherhood, the matchup should be fine. Like in the RC, I lost to Yawgmoth because I moved to 5 both post-board games. But then I faced it again and I won easily because I was keeping 7. Like when you have full power and you are understanding the pace of the game, it's fine to win. Like it's easy, I think. But of course, there are a lot of things that can happen.
Yeah. I think it can be really tricky sometimes.
Yeah, I think like playtesting a lot and understanding the basic patterns helps you because you recreate the games you played in your head, so you understand what to do. I think like the deck is very, very important. Like the resources you trade should be always favored on your part. So try to understand what will happen. Like sometimes my end is like 2 lands, DRC and counter. And if I am on the draw, I'd rather play DRC 1 turn later because if they play Orcish, I lose a card.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of strange cards that can mess your win, that are the removals, the instant speed removals. So also look out for that. Like go for the Throat, Pylon. I mean, it's open deck list, so you can check what they have. Like my opponent on turn 1 had the Thoxis in the main, and that creates strange games. Then someone else played the Chalice of the Void on turn 2. That was strong but strange. So
Yeah.
try to look out like if they have free Chalice, maybe you can bring in one more explosives in advance of you should bring in Casting to Fire and Brotherhood.
Right.
So
What do you think about
Sound-
God Grabs? This matchup.
I think it's weak because first they should board out the Eldritch Evolution, and second they should like respect it when they play a card. But also like sometimes of course it's very strong because you can counter a Cauldron, but that's mostly it. So I don't like it. Also because, as you mentioned before, you really need all your cards to do things. You can't really sit with a Spell Pierce in hand. And you already have this problem when you start drawing counter spells and they have an active Greased. It happened a lot that maybe they have Greased and you start drawing counter spells, they're Scalding, etc. And you have nothing to pressure it. So it's strange. I think if you're really worried about their non-creature spells, Force of Negation is fine. Like it's better because it always counters. But I'd rather play Force over Pierce. I was like when I had the Force main deck, sometimes we keep it in, but like it's not the best.
Interesting though.
How do you feel about subtlety in this young matchup? I felt like it's been a card I'm not willing to pitch cast unless I have pressure. And as a 4-drop, it felt hard to tag things.
I think I'm fine pitching it, especially when I keep 7, because sometimes it's fine. Like especially in the main, it happens that you play Ragaman, you play Young Wolf. If you pitch spell it, you start to get a lot of advantage. But even like when you have DRC and they play Yorkish, so sometimes you play DRC and you play a Bubble, they play Yorkish in their upkeep. If you sublet it, you Time Walk. So of course you're pitching a blood card that's usually good, but you gain tempo, so it's fine. Even versus Christ, the rule applies. So I think it's a fine card to pitch. With 4 mana, it's a bit suspect that you pass with 4 mana up. The company situation. But I usually play it even on the end step to apply pressure. I think like your plan is to trade tempo for damage. So sometimes it's fine to do a slightly worse move that gains you free damage, because then if they play Grease or if they play Yawgmoth, those cards are worse. So yeah, that's what you should do. But yeah, like the card is fine. You probably keep all the copies you have, but it's not the best. I think Scalding is much better, of course.
That makes sense. I think that's all I got.
Yeah, if someone has any other stuff to ask. Otherwise, of course, if you have nothing in mind right now, I can always ask if you tag me on the Discord.
My last question would be about Bro End. It's a weird card as like a 3 CMC sorcery. Like, I know that I've heard from Yawgmoth players that like sweeping away like 2-3 creatures like a Mana Dork plus a Bowmaster feels really good, but tapping out for like Cauldron Grist feels a bit wrong for me.
What are you asking specifically?
Like Bro End as a card, like conceptually, like it's good to sweep away creatures, but also like tapping out for Grist and Cauldron feels kind of weak and kind of like playing face up.
I mean, I think it's fine. by the interaction it creates. So I'm not super worried, to be honest. Another
Okay.
thing I wanted to point out is Cursed Totem. I know a lot of you are high on the card. I was high on the card too when I first read it, but then playtesting it a lot in those 20 matches. Like the card was really underwhelming, especially versus the flash part. And sometimes you spend your turn 2 or turn 3 to play that because maybe they played Halfling and they start playing creatures or playing Horde, and you don't have a way to respond. So I would not play Cursed Totem. I would cut it from the sideboard personally, as I did with my list. Same for Scales. Like, it's very good versus Scales, but sometimes it's not enough because they can still mess you up with Urza Saga, with the counters and stuff. So if you don't have anything, like, I would still play other cards rather Cursed Totem. I would still probably play another Brotherhood. I would play. I mean, there are a lot of cards you can play over that. Like, one card that is very strong versus Yawgmoth and only versus Yawgmoth is it's the Staticaster, because it kills a lot of stuff. Kills all the Grist tokens, kills Orcish Bowmaster and the token, kills the wolf, the plant. So, like, if I wanted to play a super narrow card, I would play that rather than the token. Yeah, or even like you can play Anger of the Gods to exile the cards, or even a second Brotherhood to kill Grist, or like I was considering Hibernation for a moment, because the card was good versus Rhinos, like you bounce all the Rhinos, but also was good versus the board of Yawgmoth, and sometimes it's fine to bounce all the primal titans that are attacking you. They attack you with 4 titans, you bounce them in hand, and then you just counter the Dryad. But like, if I want to play something unexpected, I would play something like that better than Cursed Totem.
Did you ever consider Echoing Truth for that same kind of idea?
I think the card is a bit too, like, I'd rather play Borrower at that point if I want to bounce one permanent, because like, there aren't stack of things. Of course, apart from Rhinos, yeah, you can bounce a lot of Rhinos, but in that spot, I think, well, maybe the card is actually interesting. Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know. I think it's still narrow enough that I don't want to have it in the sideboard, but it's also fine to bounce Leyline of the Void. I mean, I would probably try and see, but it's a bit too much too cute, I think.
Do you think Fable is too narrow right now, or it's a fine card?
I think it really depends on the matchup you expect to face. So I like to still having one, because I know someone will play Red-Black Evoke, but I think the matchup is fine, so you shouldn't be too worried about that.
Yeah.
That's why I play just one. But if you start to, like, if you think I will face Omnat, I will face Blue-White Control, Red-Black, and stuff, Shadow and stuff like that, maybe it's fine to have a second copy, because I think the card is really unique at providing creatures and the loot. So
yes,
I think it's a good card to have. Of course, like, you have 15 slots and you're already playing like close to 10 or 11 one-offs. So I mean, the deck can help you because you play cantrips, etc. But If you expect those decks, it's fine to play too. I don't think the card is too Naruto not to be played. I think one off is still fine.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to figure out how I'm gonna fit Force in my board right now. I've got till Friday, so who cares?
Okay, yeah, so if there are no other questions, I think we can end up the session. And this will be probably loaded on YouTube, or yeah, probably on YouTube, and I will post it on Patreon too. So thank you for
Thanks for taking some time.
the question and the discussion. And I mean, if you have anything else on your mind, just tag me in the ERC testing or general, and I will answer.
Sounds good.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks.